When did you realize gang members were great people? He refused to pay me. Now he helps me with anything I need. During my freshman year of college, I got a job as a waitress at a nearby bar and grill. The city where my school and job were located had consistently ranked among the top 5 most dangerous cities in the US for about a decade. Coming from the nearby suburbs, I was quite sheltered. I couldn't help but believe that the crime rate was exaggerated. But strangely enough, being naive and not understanding the real danger I put myself in probably saved my life more than once. One day, a party called the restaurant requesting a table for 18. When I arrived and looked at the reservation list, I got excited and asked to serve them. My manager allowed it since all the other servers got annoyed whenever they had to serve a table larger than 6 people. I stopped taking other tables about 20 minutes before their scheduled arrival and had everything prepared. The time arrived and the group came in. All young Puerto Rican men and women, in their late teens and early 20s. There was one slightly older man, probably in his early 30s. They were all wearing matching color schemes. Being who I am, I thought, how nice their coach or mentor is taking them out for a celebration. They weren't exactly wearing uniforms, so I ruled out sports. I thought maybe they were a debate team or part of the Math Olympics, something like that. In my eyes, they were clearly showing school spirit through the color of their clothing. I walked up to the front stand and greeted them with a beaming smile. I only slightly noticed the strange looks on the faces of my coworkers and other customers. I introduced myself to the older man, who was clearly the leader, and showed them to their table. They seemed to be in good spirits, so I made a comment about how they must be celebrating a victory and congratulated them. The leader smirked slightly and said, "Yeah, I guess you could say that. Haha, thanks." And we moved on. I got their drinks, took their orders, brought their food, refilled drinks, restocked wings, and so on. As they were finishing up, the leader asked for the check, and I handed him the bill that I had already prepared. Now, this restaurant had a no separate checks policy. Stupid, I know. Customers were informed of this policy, as well as the automatic gratuity for parties of 6 or more when they called to make a reservation. They were reminded again when they walked in at the host stand and during the server's introduction. It was also printed in very large letters on the first page of the menu. After I handed him the check, he said, "Sorry, I forgot to mention, but could we each get separate checks?" While I reminded him of the policy, his phone rang. He said, "Sorry, I need to take this call," then handed the check to one of the young women next to him and told her to take care of it. He told me he'd be right back and went to the vestibule to take the call. A few minutes later, I saw all of them getting up and heading to the door. I told them to have a good night and rushed to the table to collect the money. I looked everywhere, but there was nothing. This restaurant had another policy. The server, me in this case, was responsible for the table's bill, whether they paid it or not. Yes, I know this isn't legal, but guess what? The owner didn't care about that inconvenient detail. But there was no way in hell I was going to pay for this table. Something about me. I have a psycho mode at this point. I ran from the back of the restaurant to the front door, arriving just in time to block their exit. I gave them an obviously fake smile and announced through gritted teeth, "Hey, guys, I think you forgot to pay your bill." The girl who had been left in charge responded with attitude, "You wouldn't separate the check. We all have cards." Me, matching and exceeding her attitude. "Well, lucky for you there's an ATM right next to you, and I'm excellent at math." Every single person in the restaurant was looking at me in disbelief. A little 5'0" teenager, standing up to what I still didn't realize was a gang. I was convinced the girl and I were about to fight. Then the leader, my savior, returned. He got between us and asked what was going on. We both started yelling our versions of the story. He stopped us again, pulled the girl aside, and started cursing her out in Spanish. A coworker later translated it for me as something like, "Are you stupid? You could have brought attention to us and gotten us caught over a $500 check. Are you for real? I told you to take care of it, so do it, dumb woman. I should make you pay the whole thing, and the tip." He then looked over the check and told everyone that if they knew she hadn't paid, they were just as stupid as her. He ordered them to line up at the ATM. One by one, they withdrew money and handed me the amount he told them to. Meanwhile, he was making flirtatious small talk with me, like, "What kind of accent is that? How can you be Indian and look Puerto Rican? Or maybe even white? What would your parents say if you brought home a Puerto Rican guy?" Finally, he asked the question that made me realize what I had done. Would they accept me if they knew I was upper management at an organization? Just because it's a criminal organization doesn't mean I'm not an entrepreneur, right? As we both laughed at this, it hit me. This wasn't a school group. He wasn't their teacher or coach. They were a gang, and he was their leader. He thanked me for treating them like people and said I was crazy, but he liked that I wasn't afraid of him. Then he asked to see how much I had made from the table to ensure I'd been tipped enough. When I counted it up, I realized I'd made $230. I asked if I should give some back, as it was a lot. He said absolutely not, and handed me 3 more crisp $100 bills. Then he gave me his number and told me to call if I ever needed help with anything. A month later, I ended up calling him. I had locked my keys in my car, and AAA said I'd have to wait 2 hours. I thought his skills might come in handy. True to his word, he was there in 15 minutes. He mentioned my tires looked worn and asked if I was headed to work. That night, as I was walking out to my car after my shift, I noticed 4 brand new shiny tires on it. After that, he became a regular customer. Strangely enough, his daughter and I are now great friends too. After that day, life went on as usual, but with an odd touch of surrealism. I mean, I had the phone number of a gang leader in my contacts, and somehow, I didn't feel the slightest bit threatened by it. On the contrary, there was a strange sense of security lingering around me. He was never invasive, never sent inappropriate messages, and never showed up uninvited. It was as if there was an invisible boundary he respected, even being who he was. His daughter, the same one I had nearly fought that night, turned out to be surprisingly easy to get along with. Her name was Lena, and over time, she and I became good friends. She dropped by the restaurant to say hi or have a quick coffee, and sometimes I joined her after my shift. Lena wasn't what I expected at all. She had dreams, big ones. She wanted out of the life she'd grown up in, and she confided in me that her father wanted the same for her, even if he never said it outright. One night, I closed up the restaurant after an exhausting double shift. Lena had stopped by earlier to ask if I wanted to go out, but I was too tired and declined. As I locked the front door and started toward my car parked in the dim lot, I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy ones. That eerie sound that makes your stomach drop and your skin prickle. Before I could turn, a rough hand grabbed my bag, and another gripped my arm. I screamed, loud, desperate, but in that empty street, I knew no one would hear. Panic paralyzed me until a pair of headlights suddenly cut through the darkness, blinding us. A car screeched to a stop just feet away. The men dropped me instantly and ran. I fell to the ground, shaking, as the driver's door opened. It was him. I knew it was a good idea to swing by tonight, he said, voice sharp yet calm, his eyes scanning me quickly for any injuries. He pulled me to my feet and looked me over. I muttered a shaky thanks, still trying to process what had just happened. How did you know I was here? I finally asked, confused. He shrugged. I told you I'd take care of you, didn't I? He insisted on driving me home that night. The car ride was mostly silent, though my nerves were still too rattled to let it sit that way for long. You always show up at just the right time, I blurted out. He chuckled softly. Let's just say I'm a man of my word. When we pulled up to my building, he paused for a moment, looking out at the quiet street. Finally, he turned to me with a strange intensity in his eyes. You know, you're different. Most people like you would be too scared to even look at me, let alone call me for help. You're either brave or too naive for your own good. I like that about you. I didn't know how to respond. I thanked him again and got out of the car. But that night, I lay awake thinking about what he'd said. Maybe I was brave, or maybe I was just too stupid to know when to be afraid. Over the following weeks, he started showing up at the restaurant more often. Sometimes alone, sometimes with Lena or a few friends. He always treated me with respect, despite the intimidating presence he carried like armor. One night, after closing, he waved me over to their table. Lena practically pulled me into the booth, so I couldn't exactly say no. I bet you have a million questions, he teased, that knowing smile of his lingering on his face. Maybe a few, I admitted. Go ahead, then. I hesitated, but finally asked what had been on my mind since the first night I met him. Aren't you afraid? Of this life? Of what it might do to the people you care about? The table fell silent. His friends avoided my gaze, but he looked at me directly, as if weighing his words. Fear is relative, he finally said, voice steady. I do what I do because it's all I've ever known. I didn't choose this life, it chose me. The only thing I can control is how I handle it. And when it comes to the people I care about, I protect them. At any cost. He glanced at Lena as he said it, and I understood there was more to their story than I would ever know. That night shifted something for me. I stopped seeing him as just a gang leader and began to see the contradictions within him. He was terrifying to many but kind to me. dangerous, yet deeply loyal. And he clearly loved his daughter enough to want her out of his world. Weeks later, Lena called me in tears. "They took him," she sobbed. "The police. He's gone." My heart sank. I didn't know what to say. He had always been larger than life, untouchable. Yet, now he was gone, leaving an empty space in the lives of those who cared for him. In the days that followed, I thought about him often. About the words he'd said to me. "Fear is relative. What matters is how you deal with it." He was far from perfect. He was flawed and dangerous, but he had kept his word to me. And strangely enough, he had shown me that even in the darkest corners of the world, there could be loyalty, kindness, and love, if you knew where to look. I never saw him again, but his impact on my life stayed with me forever. After Lena told me he had been arrested, I was stunned. I didn't know exactly how I felt, but it was a mix of worry, anger, and sadness. He had become a constant presence in my life, a type of security I had never asked for, but somehow needed. The thought of him being in a cell, alone, while the world moved on, disturbed me more than I wanted to admit. Over the next few days, Lena and I talked a lot. She was trying to stay strong, but her voice betrayed her fear and uncertainty. During one of those conversations, I blurted out, almost without thinking, "I want to visit him." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Are you sure? You don't have to do this, you know? He'll understand." "I know, Lena, but I want to." Deep down, I knew it wasn't just about a visit. I needed to see him, to understand what I was feeling, to not abandon him now when he needed it most. Lena got me the details, and a few weeks later, there I was, in the prison's visiting room, more nervous than I had ever been. When he walked in, wearing that worn-out orange jumpsuit, my heart sank. He looked tired, his gaze harder, but when he saw me, a small smile crept onto his face. "You're crazy," were the first words he said, chuckling softly. "What are you doing here?" "I want to know how you were," I replied, trying to sound casual, though my voice shook. He watched me for a moment, as if trying to read something on my face. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You're stubborn. That's dangerous, you know?" "Then we're two of a kind," I shot back, making him laugh. After that, our conversations flowed naturally. He told me about life in prison, the people he dealt with, and I told him about the restaurant, Lena, and my own life. During those visits, the image I had of him as a gang leader began to crumble. The man in front of me was someone who listened, who could make me laugh even in that grim place, someone who saw beyond appearances. I visited him many times over the following months. With every encounter, something inside me grew stronger. I was falling in love with the man who, inexplicably, had found a place in my life, a place no one else could fill. Then Lena told me he would be released soon. A deal with the lawyers had worked out, and he was about to be freed. On the day of his release, I arrived early at the prison entrance. I was anxious, nervous, as if my entire life had led me to this moment. I stood there, waiting, until finally, the doors opened and he walked out. He was thinner but still carried himself with that confident stride, had held high, eyes sharp. My heart raced when he saw me, but before he could say anything, his gaze shifted, and he walked straight to another woman who had been waiting. She was beautiful, elegant, and carried herself with an impossible presence. I froze, watching as he embraced her. They stood there for a moment, speaking quietly, and then he took her hand and led her to a nearby car. I didn't need to see anything more to understand. He was married. A sharp pain shot through my chest, burning all the way to my throat. How had I been so naive? So stupid? I turned my back before he could see me again and walked away. For the next few days, I tried to convince myself that it didn't matter. After all, I knew who he was. I knew our story could never have a perfect ending. But that didn't make the emptiness I felt any smaller. I went back to work, trying to push him out of my mind, but inevitably, he came back. He showed up at the restaurant one night alone. When I saw him walk in, my heart sank, but I stayed calm. He sat at his usual table, and I went to serve him like any other customer. "Are you mad at me?" he asked as I stood beside his table. I swallowed hard and forced a smile. Why would I be? He didn't buy it, of course. He looked at me with that expression that seemed to see through any mask I tried to wear. "Look, I know you saw, but I never lied to you. You knew I wasn't the right man. Right or not, you knew how I felt," I shot back, almost without thinking. He was quiet for a moment, then asked softly, "Does this bother you?" My mind screamed that it should, that it was wrong, that I deserved better. But my heart had already made its decision. No, I answered quietly. And so it began. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't right, but it was what I wanted. When we were together, he made me feel like the only person in the world. He was kind, gentle, protective. He was everything I had never known I was looking for, and I was willing to accept it, even knowing I could never have him to myself. I became the mistress of a gang leader, and as crazy as that sounded, I didn't care. I was in love with the man behind the title, the man who treated me with respect, who made me laugh, who made me feel safe. In the middle of a chaotic world, he was my calm. I knew it wouldn't last forever, but in that moment, I didn't care. Maybe it was madness, maybe it was love, but for me, it was enough. People say I'm crazy. They say I've lost all self-respect, that I'm blind, that I deserve better. Maybe they're right. Maybe I should want more. But when I'm with him, none of it matters. Yes, I know he's married. I know that I'm not the only one in his life, and the woman waiting for him at home has no idea I even exist. But I also know the way he looks at me, the way he makes me feel. He treats me like I'm precious, like I'm the most important person in the room when we're together. He listens when I talk, remembers the small details I mention offhandedly, and somehow always knows what I need before I say it. He's the perfect man, at least for me, and I've stopped apologizing for that. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that I would wake up one day and realize how wrong it all was. I thought the guilt, or maybe the judgment from others, would push me away, but it never did. Instead, it just made me want him more. I used to talk to Lena about it, at least at the beginning. She never judged me outright, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. Over time, the phone calls got shorter, the texts fewer. Eventually, she stopped coming by the restaurant as often. It hurt, but I couldn't blame her. She loved her father, and maybe she couldn't understand how I could love him too, just differently. People whisper behind my back. I see the looks they give me when he stops by the restaurant to see me. They don't know the full story, of course. To them, he's just a criminal, a gang leader, a dangerous man. And to them, I'm nothing more than the other woman. But they don't see what I see. They don't see how he softens when he talks about Lena, how his face lights up when I laugh. They don't see the way he slips a hand to the small of my back when we walk, as if to let the world know I'm under his protection. They don't see the way he calms me when I'm overwhelmed, or the way he always shows up when I need him most. No questions asked. They only see the parts of him that make the headlines, the parts that make people cross the street when they see him coming. But I know the truth. I know the man behind the reputation, the man who made me feel safe in a world that used to terrify me. He may not be perfect, but to me, he's everything. I've heard it all before. How can you share him with another woman? But the answer is simple, I don't care. He chose me too, didn't he? Maybe that makes me naive, or pathetic, or weak. But love doesn't care about labels, and neither do I. He gives me what I need, and that's enough. People judge what they don't understand. They see a gang member and assume the worst. But what they don't know is that he has more honor, more loyalty, and more kindness than most of the good men I've ever met. I never expected my life to turn out this way. I never thought I'd fall for a man like him. But now that I have, I wouldn't trade it for anything. This is who I am, and this is who he is. He's the reason I realized that sometimes gang members are good people. Great people even. You just have to look beyond the surface to see it. And I do. Every single time I look at him.